Well, thanks for welcoming us into your living room or on your jog or wherever you're engaging today. If you're like me, you kind of got to stay moving and things like this. I listen to so many podcasts while I'm walking, while I'm moving and learning. So I wouldn't judge you if that's what you needed to do as to stay engaged, right? But our hope is that you would find connection with Jesus today. And I know that doing YouTube church is not the same type of connection. So I would encourage you to do that with some other people. If you're comfortable having another household with you in a small gathering to watch the service together and to partake in communion together, you'll feel free to do that. Of course, we have our time on Sunday mornings as well at 10:30 a.m. that you can join us and be prayed for. It's a bit modified, but we have music and live preaching, and we're able to engage one another in prayer. So I encourage you to come to that as well. But my hope is that God would help give you a vision for who He's calling you to be and who He's calling us to be as a church. You know, I've had lots of conversations with our city now, with the mayor's office and the mayor's self and King County council members and things like that, and seeing how the church could begin to engage the long-term process of development, of caring for people who are hurting and broken right now and who need jobs and need training and need interview skills and those kind of things. And so we're looking at that. So maybe that's a way you can connect with me, or go to our care page and fill out a partnership form there so that you can help us engage these people who are maybe struggling because they don't have a home right now, or they're out of work. And so we're just trying to work together with the city to become good citizens here in Issaquah. So reach out to me if God's been placing something on your heart of a way to connect with the city, or to connect with your neighbors, and we'll begin to see what God has for us in this new season of ministry, which is very strange, isn't it? But God is not done working. He is present and active in all things, and He is up to something. And we're getting on board with that. One thing we're doing is now it's going to be on March 20th, which is a big grocery giveaway. So we're going to need some people in that morning to be there about 9:30 and help move boxes into trunks and give away a bunch of food, probably 100,000 pounds of food to our neighbors. So that's an idea that we're getting going for March 20, and then hopefully some follow-on events like that as well. So that's some of the things that we're attempting to do in our city that we could use your help for. So that's just by way of announcement. We also want to do a baptism coming up on Easter, live in our church building. And so if that's something God's been placing on your heart, just to make that commitment, I want to say yes to Jesus. I want to affirm that publicly, be baptized into His death, and be buried with Him in the waters of baptism and raised to new life. Then reach out to me, and we will talk about that right away. Also, one other thing, just a small note, but it's important, is that we are launching our elder nomination process. So if you know of somebody who is in our church that is spiritually mature and has a voice that we need to hear among the elders, we can give you a list of qualifications in the newsletter. But as you look at those things, could you get those names back to us so we can begin praying about and talking to those people to see if they would be interested in being on our leadership team in this way. So those are some things that we have just kind of coming up. Thanks for letting me do a few announcements. But what we're going to do right now is sing. We're going to study Genesis chapter 32, this really interesting passage where God comes and wrestles with Jacob. What is that about? And what kind of implications does that have for us? What do we need to do about that? Then we're going to take communion, sing again, and then that'll be it for today. But I'm praying that God would bless your time and those you're gathered with, hopefully, so that we can really hear from Him today.
Do you feel the world is broken?
We do.
Do you feel the shadows deepen?
We do.
But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through?
We do.
Do you wish that you could see it all made new?
We do.
Is all creation groaning? Is a new creation coming? Is the glory of the Lord to be the light within our midst? Is it good that we remind ourselves of this?
It is.
Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy of this? Does the Father truly love us?
He does.
Does the Spirit move among us?
He does.
And does Jesus, our Messiah, hold forever those he loves?
He does.
Does our God intend to dwell again with us? He does. Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. From every people and tribe, every nation and tongue, he has made us a kingdom and priest to God, to reign with the Son. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy? Is he worthy? Is he worthy of this? He is, he is, he is, he is, he is worthy. He is worthy of all blessing and honor and glory. He is worthy of this. He is.
Have you ever thought about changing your name legally? Like just going and picking a new one? I'm sure by now you know people have made some pretty crazy changes. I remember years ago a guy changed his name to Trout Fishing in America, right? Recently, A guy named Simon Smith changed his name to Bacon Double Cheeseburger. And John Rothwell, these are all UK guys, he chose the name King Arthur Uther Pendragon to go back to the mythical legacy, right? Tyler Gould changed his name to Tyrannosaurus Rex. Go figure, right? A guy named Dan Miller decided to change his name to The Dan Miller Experience. So I guess his first name is The Dan right now, right? A guy named George Garrett calls himself legally now Captain Fantastic, faster than Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, Wolverine, Hulk, and the Flash combined. Right? Jose Luis Espinal took the name Jesus Christ. And I think he actually believes that he is. Those are really big shoes to fill. If you're gonna change your name, you've got some big shoes to fill. But then again, my daughter Maria is named after the mother of Jesus. My Alexander, well, that name just means King of Men, so those are some pretty big shoes to fill. My son Maxwell, we named him that over the passage in Isaiah 58 where the hope would be that he would be a flourishing garden of life that will provide blessing to the broken and poor. Yeah, big shoes to fill for sure. Taking on the name of great people adds a sense of destiny as well as obligation. Maybe you're feeling the strain of living up to a name that your parents gave you, for a famous ancestor or something like that. At least your parents didn't give you 25 middle names like Autumn, Sullivan, Corbett, Fitzsimmons, Jeffries, Hart, Burns, Johnson, Willard, Dempsey, Tooney. Well, on and on and on and on and on and on. The last names you may recognize even more: Clay, Frazier, Foreman, Brown, Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, right? Joe Frazier, George Foreman. This 13-year-old Brit has middle names that pay homage to every gloved heavyweight boxing champ up to 1974. So, go figure. That's a lot to live up to. But enough about boxing. Let's talk about wrestling. Actually, we're going to shift our attention to the biblical patriarch, right? The father of the nation of Israel, Jacob, and his wrestling match with a strange figure that resulted in his name change, which is then still the name that his people have to this day. And it's a curious name at that. But that new name would describe the relationship of Jacob, now Israel, to his God, but also the continuing relationship that God has with the nation of Israel. And those who, through the Messiah, are now included in true Israel, which would be those who follow Jesus the Messiah. So here's the setting. Jacob had fled after stealing his brother's blessing. We kind of looked at some of that backstory last week. It was just after he had manipulated his brother into selling his birthright. And so Esau, his brother, is enraged. And he's not a guy you want to tick off. He's the one that's the woodsman. He's the hunter. He's the fighter. And Jacob wasn't so much that kind of guy. He was more sneaky and deceptive. So Esau had vowed to kill Jacob. But their mom, Rebecca, figured out what he was going to do, intervened, and sent Jacob away to go find a wife with her brother up north in Haran. So after a long time in Haran, Jacob finally escapes Uncle Laban's household. He had actually spent 20 years of his life laboring for Laban. Instead of just the few days that he had originally intended, he's going to go let things blow over. It's 20 years later. And, he's now gone through this working for years and years and years and years. He's got now a wife and another wife. But through that time, the deceiver, Jacob, that's what his name meant, gets deceived. Uncle Laban plays him over and over and over. But during this time, God is blessing Jacob, just like he said he was going to do. I will not let go of you. I'm going to hold on to you, and I'm not going to let go of you until I have done what I will have promised you. And he's made him very prosperous and wealthy. He has 11 sons and 1 daughter through 2 wives and their servants. And now Jacob was finally en route home to Canaan, to the land that was promised to him. But now he's coming face to face with the reality that he left behind, which is, oh no, now what is Esau going to do? It's been 20 years. Has the anger just gotten stronger and more violent, or has it subsided? And he must have been nervous, because when we get to Genesis chapter 32, which is where we'll be today, and we see that Yahweh sends angels, or aides, or envoys to protect him and assure him of God's promise. You're surrounded. You're surrounded by my presence. So 20 years ago, as a teen, most likely, he's had this encounter with God on his flight from his brother. And he had made a promise to Yahweh, if you give me food and clothing and you prosper me, a bunch of other conditions, then I will worship you, Yahweh, as the true God, the one true creator God. Last week I warned you against trying to set up those kind of conditions with God. I don't think that's ever really going to go well. But now in Genesis 32, if we just want to look at verse 1, Jacob is on his way now after arranging kind of this settlement agreement covenant with Laban. This is my territory, that's your territory, we're not crossing. So Jacob goes on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "Oh, this is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And then he sent messengers to Esau and said this is what's going on. This is the situation, and I'm coming. And this is the thing. He's got protection from God. He's got the angel of the Lord encamping around him. And we know that from Psalm 34:7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And God is giving him a picture of this. The angels are surrounding him. And I'm curious about Jacob, and I'm also a little bit curious about you. How much do you trust? How much do we trust in the supernatural protection that God has offered us? If God doesn't indeed surround those with his angels and protection, do you trust that? Or do you go to your own devices again? What does it look like to trust him instead of in our own protection plans? Can we say to God, can you say to God, can you live like this? Cover me, God. I'm going in. I'm going to go do your work. I'm going to go do your thing. I'm going to follow in your steps. Cover me as I'm going in. You've got the air war and I'll do the ground war. I think that's the way to live. But does Jacob trust in the protection of Yahweh and his angels? No. He actually schemes to bribe his brother, and he sets up a series of gifts. Okay, I'm going to give him in waves just all of these animals. Livestock was the currency of the day, right? So I'm going to give him all these different things. Handed him over to his servants and said, "Go and if when my brother meets you, let him know that it's from me, and this is a present, and I want to appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face." Verse 20, perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed the night in the camp. He fears Esau, and he's learning to fear God. So Jacob's here, no doubt in his own mind, just wrestling with anxious thoughts and what God has promised. But he said he was going to do this, but now Esau's coming, and this could be a threat. And so I think he's wrestling with the present realities while he's weighing the power of God. So hold on. Are you with me? wrestling with the present realities and weighing out the power of God and his ability to come through on his promises. If you've ever had a year that made that anxious weighing, that wrestling, it was this last year, right? What is God going to do? Look at the present realities. Is God going to show up? What about his power? And so there's this internal wrestling that happens. But it doesn't just stay internal at this point. And we have a very curious situation that comes up. I'm just going to read it right through and then we'll come back and discuss it. So, verse 22. That same night he arose and took his 2 wives and his 2 female servants and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. That's where the Jabbok River comes into the Jordan. That's an easy place to ford there. So he took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. So he fled across the Jordan with his staff, encounters God. On his way back, he sends everybody ahead and he's alone with God. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Not alone. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, so they're wrestling and Jacob is not letting go, he touched his hip socket. Just hit him. Just a cheap blow, you might say. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then this man says, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What's your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then this man said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the hip or eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of his thigh. How very strange. How very strange. He names the place Peniel because he's come face to face with God. He's encountered the face of God. And so to encounter the face of God is to be in his presence. And yet God shows up as a man wrestling. That's a curious thought, isn't it? First of all, it's just interesting because we've learned from the Old Testament that you can't really see God and live. There's got to be some sort of filter in that presence. Later, Hosea says in chapter 12, verses 3 through 4, that this angel was God, was Elohim, and so we're getting this picture that a certain angel in the Old Testament is the God of Israel in human form. And if you look back at these situations where there's the angel of the Lord, capital Lord, all those caps, that's Yahweh, the angel of Yahweh, and his appearing as a man before people is like a filtered presence, a way that we can finally understand and connect with him. Although wrestling, it doesn't seem to be the way to do it. But before we discuss the wrestling, let's learn a word. Theophany. Say it with me. Theophany. You can say it alone. Say it at home. Say it with your friends. Theophany. It's an appearance of God that people can discern. They can make sense of, right? Which implies that not all appearances of God, think about this, are recognized by people. Well, right? I mean, we affirm, we say he's omnipresent, that he is present and active in all things, even when we don't discern it. So a theophany is when God shows up in a form that we can discern. And the term comes from theos, which is God in Greek, and pheno, which is to appear or be revealed. So phano, we've got theophany, we've got an appearance of God. And people can't possibly process God's nature as spirit that he is. So a theophany allows God to make his presence known in a physical way that people can discern through their senses. That could be like the wind, the burning bush, where there's flames of fire, or in a physical form like the angel of Yahweh that we're talking about. So this unfiltered divine presence is gonna destroy you, right? Exodus 33:20 declares, "You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." But Jacob just said he saw him face to face, right? Because that's a filtered form. That's God taking an appearance so that we can interact with him. Deuteronomy 5:24. Yahweh, our God, has shown us his glory and his majesty, and we have heard his voice from the fire. Today we've seen that a person can live even if God speaks with them. So they're learning that, okay, God can interact with us in a way that doesn't just completely destroy us. And so theophany protects people as well as allowing for contact with God. That makes sense? So now we got this wrestling match. What is going on? Why is God wrestling with Jacob? It wasn't like Jacob went and started wrestling with people. God comes and starts this wrestling match. And your mind might be just going like mine is. Did it start as an argument? Did it start as, hey, you, I don't like your face, or where did this whole thing start? We don't really know, but we do know this: Jacob is a heel grabber, right? That's how he started out his life. He's grabbing the heel of his twin brother in the womb. He's always been trying to get first place, usurp, and all that. And God's been grabbing at the heel of this heel grabber all of Jacob's life, trying to turn Jacob into the man that God wants him to be. He's working on this. Now, I'm not going to say God's failing because he knows the process. He knows what he's doing, but Jacob keeps coming up short, and God's trying to turn him into the man of God that he wants. And so here we go. Jacob is wrestling back with God, but God is ultimately wrestling with Jacob. And God's been at work confronting his flaws, but still prospering him, calling him out for his deception, even letting some of his deception come back on him, but in fulfillment of his original promises, just continually prospering him. He says, I'll do everything that I promised I would do, and I'm not going to let go of you until that happens. And so God is initiating this wrestling with him in order to make a point of some sort. And after this face-to-face wrestling match in the dark, when Jacob won't let go, Jacob receives a name change. Okay, he says, I need a blessing from you. You're obviously a being that I need a blessing from, so give me a blessing. And that blessing comes in the form of a name change. So what's in a name change, right? For me, it seems normal that you earn your name. That's what a lot of our culture is about right now, is making a name for yourself. And Jacob, his old name is Deceiver. He has to be quick. He has to get ahead of everyone else now. And now what does he have? He has a limp. He's slowed down, and now he has to rely more on the promises of God. He's been very wily. He's been very, very sneaky. He's figured things out, and he's making things happen. and now he's super slowed down. And this name Israel, it doesn't necessarily mean he fights with God. If you tear apart the Hebrew there, it's more that God himself is fighting with him. So God fights, or God exerts himself, that sort of thing. And we are a people, tell me if I'm wrong, we're a people whose nature is to struggle with God to avoid becoming the people that we could be. I mean, he calls us, he gives us destiny, he calls us into things, and we're like, I don't know if I really want to do that. Who fight against God, even as he fights to change us and make us who we could be. God's struggling to continue to take us there. So Jacob's not a new man. God is still, he's set up, I'm going to continue to strive with you to make you the kind of person. But Jacob has learned a new level of reliance on God. He's had a tendency to rely on himself and his own resources, as Trimper Longman III says, but now he's come to rely more on God. He's got his reliance on himself, and now he's got to rely more because he's not quick on his feet anymore. And I love what Trimper Longman goes on to say. He says, the name Israel not only describes Jacob's relationship with God, but also his future descendants. They too will struggle with God as they try to be self-reliant. But they'll only succeed when they give up confidence in themselves and rather put their trust in God. So I want us to think today, as we just dial this into some application, what does it look like to be in his grip? What does he want from us anyway? I just want to give you two categories of I think the kind of change that God is looking for as we pull out of this passage. He wants a change in character. He's pursuing a change in character. But as we see in the saga of Jacob, in these 20 years that God's been working with him and now fighting with him, struggling with him, wrestling with him, we see that he doesn't force a character transformation. Think about that. He doesn't force a character transformation. You probably asked him to just change me. He doesn't force it, but he is willing to make us limp. He doesn't force a character transformation, but he is willing to make us limp. Slow you down. And I wonder if you're still fighting against the person that God is calling you to be. Are you still pressing against God when he says, I'm calling you to be this person? Because here's the truth. He's calling you to become who you already are in Christ. So if you're in Christ, you are a new creation. You have a new name, and he's asking you to become who you already are. Many of us think, well, I'm not good enough, and I can't possibly please God, and I just need to be less of myself. And he's saying, no, I need you to be the whole self that I'm creating you to be. I've already named you, and I've got a goal and a destiny for you. I need you to be more you. God is not worried that your desires are going to be too big. He thinks your desires are too small. You don't lean into who he's calling you to be. So becoming who you already are. You already are this person, but you're not yet. And so God's got us in that struggle. John Goldingay says, we have to want to yield to God's purpose and God's vision for us if the change in us is going to be authentic. Right? Yield to God's purpose and his vision for us if we want the change in us to be authentic. But Jacob doesn't want to yield. And he really never does. He just won't give up. So that's the change in character that God is looking for. And also I think he wants a change in confidence. We've already heard echoes of this, of self-reliance or of learning to rely on God and his resources. And I think it's just the difference between God confidence and self-confidence. Do I trust in myself? And you know how anxiety producing self-confidence is. Come on, you got this. You need to make it happen. You've got this. And it's an interesting paradox. When we build on a foundation of self-confidence, it's so shaky, isn't it? We want solid ground. We want peaceful confidence. You know when that happens? When you're shaken and quaking in the fear of God. That's when you actually have a solid foundation. So when you trust in yourself, you're on fearful ground. When you fear God, you're on solid ground. Do you sense that? If you're pouring into your own self and what you can accomplish and how you can get it done, and I'm just going to make this happen, you're going to continually be in the shaky ground. But if you say, God, you are powerful, you are awesome, I don't even know what I'm dealing with sometimes. You are so amazing, and I'm kind of fearful, but I'm in awe. I worship you. You're never on more solid ground because you've put things in their right place. God's up here and you're down here. And that's the change in confidence that we're supposed to have. So one last thought. Should we be wrestling with God? I mean, we know God is wrestling to get this change in character out of us and this change in confidence. But we've heard it sometimes. I've just really been wrestling with God over this. Is that good? Is that a good idea? Oswald Chambers in his classic My Utmost for His Highest says, you have to wrestle against the things that prevent you from getting to God. So that's where you wrestle with. If something is in your way of getting to God and his character, you need to wrestle with that and get that out of the way. You have to wrestle against the things that prevent you from getting to God, and you wrestle in prayer for other souls. Yeah? Many of you are in that process right now. But never say that you wrestle with God in prayer. We wrestle before God, right? If you do wrestle with God, you'll be crippled the rest of your life. So we wrestle before God over these things and the thoughts that are running through our head and the things that are keeping us from this change of character. And we engage the lies, right? We go after and battle the lies in the head about the character of God and who he says you are. Because I think this is the real spiritual warfare, the wrestling that you and I need to do today around the change in character and the change in confidence is to claim the truth about ourselves and about who God is and cancel out the lies. I know you, enough of you and enough of your stories to know some of the names you've been called and some of the names you call yourself. And I ache over that. I know some of the names you've been called. Disappointment. You've been called not enough. Ugly. Weak. Worthless. I'm not going to go on. But you could take a moment with the Spirit and say, what are the names that I've been called, and what have I called myself? And then I need you to ask this question. Do those names come from the heart of the Father? Do they? Do they? Seriously? Are those the names that the Father calls you? No. No. You are beloved, worthy, beautiful, complete because of Jesus. Those are the names that he calls you. So where do those names come from? Just say it with me. Where do those names come from? And to where can they return? It comes from the pit of hell, from the enemy of our souls, using other people and the war in our own heads telling us who we are. And we need to wrest away those thoughts. We need to do battle in our brains. We need to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Is this true about God? Is this true about me? Jesus, the truth is, he has changed your name. You are a new creation. You will no longer be called timid, for instance. You'll be called warrior. You'll no longer be called trashy. You'll be called treasure. You're no longer going to be called shame. Your name will be called honor. So I know this. I know this about you. Wherever you're listening from, watching from, I know this about you. You've wasted enough time living in your old names. And even now we can live into our new names. So of whom will you ask this question? This question, who do you say that I am? Are you gonna look to your own brain where that warfare is going on? No. Are you going to look to those people outside of you who have been a voice of the enemy for you, the voice of the enemy that comes into your own brain? Are you going to ask them, who do you say that I am? You're going to ask your family, your coworkers, your old drinking buddies? Or are you going to go straight to the source of life itself and ask, who do you say that I am? One clear takeaway right now is this. Decide right now who gets to speak those words to your soul. As we move to our time of communion, I just want us to focus on that new perspective that God has about us. Because we were once alienated. This is Colossians 1:21. You who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. We have been reconciled in his body of flesh. Your new name, your new identity, your status as a new creation comes because of his body broken for you. Do this in remembrance of him. And he has presented us holy and blameless and above reproach in him. His blood has purified the altar of our souls so that God can now dwell safely with us. You think of the theophany, right? The word we learned about how God's presence needs to be filtered. The space has to be prepared for God to come and dwell. And this is how it's been done. He says this is the new covenant, the new partnership in his blood. Jesus, we are so thankful that you have given to us a new identity. And it amazes me, and I think it amazes all of us, that you have said that we are this new person, that we now just become who you already say we are. That you see us as righteous, you see us as blameless, you see us as holy, and then you call us up to that identity. We're so thankful that you have prepared the way for us like that. Amen.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. of God. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down and surrendered now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down and surrendered now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Yeah, all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will
Joining us for our weekend worship service. So glad that you logged in, joined in, and are participating with us in that way. Don't hesitate to hit the connect button on our page at issaquah.cc, our care page, our give page there. There's lots of different ways to interact with us, and we want to pull together and see people brought into the family of Christ as we bring the message of Jesus out into our city. May God richly bless you until we meet again.